Normally, when you ask people about Revolutionary War history, they automatically think of places like Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey even. Very rarely does someone respond with North Carolina. Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. However, I hope I can change your mind about North Carolina's involvement and the importance of it in the war effort after we get a look at a place on the way to Wilmington known as Moore's Creek. After the small skirmish in Lexington, Great Britain decided they wanted to quickly end the trouble they were having with these rascally Americans. To do this in the most efficient fashion, they wanted to capture the area where the Cape Fear River pours into the Atlantic Ocean near Wilmington in what is now called Brunswick County. In capturing that area in Seaport, the Crown would effectively cut the colonies in half and prevent goods from moving in and out and quickly bring all resistance to a close. In 1776, the capital of North Carolina wasn't Raleigh yet as it is today. It was actually New Bern, which is a small town located on the Neuse River, which ends up in the Pamlico Sound. Luckily for Great Britain, they had a Loyalist by the name of Josiah Martin in the governor's office. And Martin was able to convince the Crown that he could muster 5,000 Scottish Loyalists from the Carolinas to march to the coast and meet the British ships that would be attacking the harbor and arriving there. He got them convinced so much, actually, that General Howe in Boston hand-selected two Scottish officers, Major MacDonald and Captain McLeod, to head to New Bern and lead the Loyalist march to the coast. Unfortunately for the British, though, when McLeod and MacDonald arrived in New Bern, it was not a large town, and so they immediately arose suspicion. The rebels there didn't believe the story they told them about being in the state to visit relatives. Now, if you remember what I said earlier, Governor Martin had promised the British Crown 5,000 soldiers. But what he actually got together was a ragtag group of about 1,600 Scotsmen, and of that 1,600, only 500 actually had guns. The rest, in true Scots style, carried the broadswords with them. When the rebels in that area finally learned of the plot and understood everything involved, they developed quite a brilliant plan. Colonel Moore would take the rebel militia that was in New Bern and follow one day behind the Loyalists who were heading down to Wilmington. Meanwhile, the First North Carolina Continentals, led by Colonel Caswell and Lillington, would meet the Scottish Loyalists head-on. That way, any escaping Loyalists would be stopped by the rebels behind the Loyalist lines. When judging the route that was going to need to be taken, the rebels in Caswell's army realized that the Loyalists would have to cross over Widow Moore's Bridge to finish their march to Wilmington. Lillington and Caswell chose this as the place to make their stand. The night before their battle, they actually brilliantly removed all the planks from the bridge and then greased the side ropes to make crossing near impossible. The creek at that time was said to be about 6 feet deep, so wading across would be completely impossible. They would have to find a way to get across that bridge. You might wonder why the Loyalists didn't have scouts out and about and know that Colonel Caswell was there waiting for him, and they actually did. But the scouts came back and reported to MacDonald and McLeod that the Patriot numbers were far less than they actually were, and it built their confidence. So on the morning of February 29th, the Scot Loyalists attempted to cross the bridge, and as they were crossing, before they even got across, due to the boards being out and the greasing of the ropes, many fell off and drowned before they even got to the other side. Finally, some of the Scotsmen did make it to the other side with their broadswords in hand. Remember, only 500 of them had guns. And as they pulled their swords out and started to come forward, the command fire was given, and the sound of rebel muskets and cannon just filled the air. The Loyalists were almost completely obliterated as they came across, and those that survived that initial attack ran. But as you remember, Colonel Moore's army was at the rear, already waiting for them. According to a letter written by Colonel Moore right after the event, he said estimates range from 30 to 50 Loyalists who died during that, and more than 850 were taken prisoner. The rebels, on the other hand, led by Caswell, had only 1 dead and 1 wounded. This was an amazing American victory and gave the Americans a boost of morale that was desperately needed. It truly was the first Patriot victory of the American Revolution, and this act actually helped to stall the British invasion of the South for most of the Revolutionary War and completely ended the royal authority in North Carolina forever. Presently, the Moores Creek battlefield is part of the National Park Service. One of the goals of Moores Creek is to tell a living history program of the soldiers and people who were at the time of the Revolution. This includes first and third person narrations and demonstrations of everyday life, such as cooking and weaving and candle making. As great as the story of Moores Creek is, that is not where it ends. That actually acts as a beginning. That's the catalyst for something even more important in North Carolina history. North Carolina Historical Review says that it was after this open hostility that the General Assembly gathered to write what's called the Halifax Resolve on April 12, 1776. What this did was effectively call for a complete separation of Great Britain and America. North Carolina then became the first colony to propose this idea.